I'm Taylor Riggs in San Francisco in for Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, launch day. Disney's streaming service, Disney Plus, is hit by technical difficulties in its debut, but some call it a temporary setback and that the media giant will meet its goal of 90 million users in 5 years. Plus, fake news division stoked in the current tinderbox that is Hong Kong, how false news and rumors are playing a part in protests that continue to grip the city. And market share, buyers trading BMWs and Toyotas for Tesla's Model 3. More on Bloomberg's survey of 5,000 owners of Elon Musk's hit car. But first, our top story. So the launch of Disney's streaming service was met with some technical glitches and crashes. Still, Disney Plus worked successfully for many subscribers, and it generated excitement and buzz all over social media, adding to the continued streaming wars that already exists. For more, we are joined by Rich Greenfield of Lightshed Partners and Bloomberg's Lucas Shaw, who covers the streaming wars for us. Rich, let me start with you. Are the technical glitches perhaps a good sign, showing that demand exceeded expectations?
You know, honestly, I have no idea. I think the reality is technical glitches are sort of commonplace in big launches. You know, you've seen it with HBO and Game of Thrones. You never like to see these things. It's obviously unfortunate for Disney. Maybe it was demand driven. Who really knows? I think the reality is it's irrelevant in the scheme of this is Disney's long-term strategy. I mean, Bob Iger has thrown down the gauntlet. This is the future of the company. It's streaming. It's not even just about Disney Plus. I mean, he's moving FX content hours after it is on television, on your cable system. It's going to be on Hulu now. And so it really is leaving the legacy bundle in the past. And I think as long as these technical issues are not ongoing, meaning 2-3 weeks from now, as long as you're not still hearing about technical issues, no one's going to remember about the early troubles this morning.
And Lucas, today, did Disney cement itself as a clear, formidable competitor to Netflix and the likes in the streaming wars?
I think so, and it has for a long time now. If you ask people in Hollywood, around the entertainment business, and to some extent in Silicon Valley, and especially on Wall Street, most people have viewed Disney Plus as the most competitive of the new services. Apple TV Plus just doesn't have the same library. Peacock and HBO Max are much further out. And Disney is the largest entertainment company in the world. Its movie studio is dominant by adding a lot of assets from Fox. It has some of the best TV shows in the world. You know, the real question moving forward will be how many of these streaming services can the market tolerate? Right now we have Hulu, Amazon, and Netflix, with Netflix being the clear leader. Most people expect that Disney Plus will be kind of additive to Netflix, that people will be able to pay for both. But if it slows the growth of new subscribers to Netflix at all, that's bad news for the company and for investors in it.
Rich, react a little bit to those comments. How do you see Disney in the context of the broader streaming wars?
You know, I look at it pretty differently, because I think about the world from the standpoint of the legacy cable bundle, where people spend anywhere from, at the low end, for call it $45, $50 for one of these over-the-top cable services like Hulu Live or YouTube TV, upwards of $100 or more for Comcast or Charter Spectrum. Those bundles are going away. I mean, the consumers are just giving up on those bundles. Cord cutting is at record paces. And I think seeing all of this great content from Disney Plus, Apple TV Plus, Netflix, Amazon, soon Peacock from NBC, it's just making it easier and easier to cut the cord, and that frees up a tremendous amount of wallet. And so this is like adding fuel to a fire that's already started burning, and this is going to make it that much easier to cut the cord going forward. And I really think that this is sort of the industry. You know, today is like a real watershed moment. This is Disney basically saying, look, the cable bundle's in the past, the future is streaming. We're going to put all of our best assets onto streaming, and whatever happens to the bundle, that's, so be it. It's going to be a tough place for ESPN and their future, but I think Disney is clearly telling you that they know that the bundle is dead, or certainly dying, and they've got to move forward.
So, Rich, you talk about the cannibalization of traditional cable subscriptions. Dan Ives over at Wedbush said about 10% of Netflix's base could be at risk with Apple and Disney. Do you have figures on if there's cannibalization going on at Netflix and some of the competitors?
Honestly, I think it's one of the more absurd comments I've heard. The reality is consumers want to stream. They want to stream lots of stuff. And these are not replacement products. You're not choosing between Netflix and Disney Plus. You're saying, oh, I don't need cable service anymore. If you're not a sports fan, you're going to give up on cable service. If you want to watch The Crown this week, Disney Plus doesn't satisfy that. If you want to watch back episodes of Friends, you're going to need HBO Max. Look, people have had HBO for years, and HBO's been far more expensive than Netflix. HBO has 34 million subscribers today. No one is saying, oh my God, I have Netflix, I don't need HBO anymore. These things are going to coexist just the way HBO and Showtime have coexisted. I think about it less in terms of price to value than what do you actually want? What does the consumer want? If you want this content, if you want Stranger Things, if you want The Crown, if you want Dolomite Is My Name, if you want The Irishman, you have to have Netflix. If you want Mandalorian, you're going to need Disney Plus. And so I don't think these are substitutes the way some people are making them out to be. I think the loser is going to be the entertainment bundle, where there's a lot of content that's been overpriced with very little flexibility. And I think that's where people should be looking for where these dollars and subscribers come from.
And Lucas, what has your reporting showed you about the appetite for 2, 3, 4 subscription services that Rich just mentioned?
Most of it is kind of research and, frankly, informed speculation. It's really hard to know how much people are willing to pay for, because it depends on how they balance the different things they're spending. I think if you ask the average consumer, they might not know how much they're spending specifically on cable, because it's often bundled with internet. They might not treat their Amazon subscription as a video subscription. They're really paying for Prime. And so we will see as future bears out what happens. I do think Rich is overstating the decline of cable a little bit. He's right that this is a watershed moment and that Disney is signaling that the internet is the future, and that's a very big deal. But even the CEO of Netflix has said that the decline of cable will be slow and steady, and though it is accelerating, you still have tens of millions of households in the US and hundreds of millions worldwide that are paying, and that's not going to disappear overnight. So you will have consumers that have to make a choice, both sports fans and differently older consumers who may just want to keep watching live television.
Rich, you take a look at companies this morning like CBS with their all-access program with Showtime, and they've reported lower margins, lower profit because of the heavy investment in original content. In your analysis, do you just assume further profit erosion? When do we start making money from these streaming wars?
Look, streaming is expensive. Think about Disney stock. Disney for 2020, fiscal September 2020, expectations for Disney were $8.33, I think, literally in May of 2018. So in May of 18 for 2020, that's what people were forecasting. I think consensus now on Bloomberg, I think, is down to somewhere around $5.60. And so, this is an acknowledgement that getting into the streaming wars, this is kind of a long-term game, a play for subscribers, a play for direct consumer relationships. But this is really hard. And, you look at Disney, and I got up at 6 a.m. this morning. I watched the first episode of Mandalorian. It's 36 minutes long. I enjoyed it. It's definitely for a diehard Star Wars fan. But the reality is there isn't a lot else to do. I don't have a long list of shows to now go watch tonight on Disney Plus. I can't watch episode 2 of Mandalorian until Friday. I can't watch episode 3 until the following Friday. So there's not, I can go back and kind of watch catalog, but in terms of new and fresh content to watch, there isn't a lot to keep me busy. And I think that's why you're going to see companies like Disney have to invest far more heavily in the content for these services. I don't care whether you're CBS All Access or whether you're Disney with Disney Plus or Hulu. Streaming services require you to create addicts. You have to keep filling and giving people a reason to come back every single day for hours at a time. Netflix has done a great job of that. Now it's on everybody else to follow that and to create the same type of addicts so that you keep paying. Because remember, the one thing that we all have to remember is it's really easy in a streaming world to click cancel or pause and come back a few months later. That was much harder in the cable world where there were boxes and satellite dishes on your house. It's become really easy to kind of go on and off in the digital world.
Lightshed Partners, Rich Greenfield, and Bloomberg Technologies, Lucas Shaw, thank you both for joining us. And coming up, music video app TikTok is gearing up to take on Washington as it seeks a new U.S. policy chief. We break down the story next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. Microsoft is among the plaintiffs in a case reviewed by the U.S. Supreme Court Tuesday over the so-called DACA program. The software giant is defending its employees who were brought to the U.S. as undocumented children. The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program shields nearly 700,000 qualified young immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally from deportation. It is being challenged by the Trump administration. Microsoft President Brad Smith argues that the affected immigrants, which are called Dreamers, are an essential source of talent that Microsoft depends on. Other tech companies like Google, IBM, Apple, and Amazon have filed legal documents saying that ending DACA will hurt the U.S. economy. A decision is likely to come next year. Now, TikTok is being investigated for national security concerns, but the company is building up its fledgling lobbying operations to counter stepped-up pressure in Washington over its Chinese ownership and wage an escalating battle with Facebook for viewers. To discuss, we're joined by John Dermody. He's data privacy and security lawyer at O'Melveny and Myers. John is formerly a legal advisor as well at the National Security Council. And also with us, it is Bloomberg's Ben Brody, who has been covering the story for us. Ben, let me just start with you. What has been the reaction from this stepped up lobbying efforts in D.C.?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's in the process. We kind of captured it right as it's starting. So they're bringing on a new U.S. policy chief. They're revamping or really bolstering their internal team. And then they're doing some of their outside consultants. And so the question is going to be, when they bring those outside consultants to the Hill and to regulators to tell their story, to say, hey, we're an American company and we don't take direction from Beijing, what is going to be that reaction remains to be seen. Those meetings haven't really started yet. But, I do think it's worth mentioning this is kind of blue chip representation here, and I think they're putting up at least a good fight as these tensions really ramp up.
John, the key issue here is if TikTok is a U.S. company or a Chinese company. Which is it?
So I think that's somewhat missing the point. Part of the new CFIUS regulations, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, is looking not just at U.S. ownership, but whether investors, foreign investors, have the ability to get access to non-public technical information about data. And so I think whether or not it is a U.S. company is part of the concern, but there's broader concerns about potentially having access to this information by foreign powers.
And so, John, what is the answer to that question? If China wants data, if they want information, could they get it? Would TikTok be required to fold over that information to Beijing?
Well, that's certainly the concern amongst the national security community. I think there are ways to mitigate that. One of the potential ways is potentially keeping the data within the United States. But China has been, I think, very aggressive in wanting to gain access to data and requiring companies that are in China to participate with them.
Ben, what is your reaction to that? Has been the key issue in D.C. over data privacy, over turning over data to Beijing that's from U.S. users?
Absolutely. That is sort of the core issue that folks here in Washington are looking at. Republican Senator Josh Hawley just last week, he held a hearing where he excoriated Facebook. He talked about Communist Party officials kicking down the door and demanding data. And he said, parents here in the U.S., if you don't know about TikTok, your kids do, and you should. It is absolutely a concern that's animating a lot of people here in the United States, not just on the Republican side of the aisle. Since my story went up this morning, Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer, he sent a letter to the Army and he said, hey, I'm really concerned that you're trying to recruit teens on TikTok. You're trying to appeal to young people on this platform where they're flocking by the millions right now. And I really want you to reconsider this and probably not do it because it very well may be a national security threat.
You know, John, we've heard from a lot of other big tech companies, namely Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook, which has really highlighted the concern about Chinese tech dominance. Given your history on the National Security Council, how worried are you about Chinese tech dominance?
So I do think that these are the issues that are animating a lot of the concerns at the National Security Council and throughout the national security sort of apparatus within the United States. Technology is the new frontier, and as whether it's data or information and communications technology, I think you're seeing a trend in CFIUS, in supply chain, even in team telecom sort of concerns about taking a strong look at how to compete more fulsomely with China.
You know, Ben, as we take a look, it is not only about turning over data, but a lot of this, as Mark Zuckerberg was pointing out, is about free speech. What are you hearing in D.C. about concerns of Chinese tech dominance operating basically on internet rules where free speech may not be allowed?
Right. No, I mean, that's exactly what we're hearing. It's really interesting because you hear a lot from legislators here in D.C. about how they want American tech platforms to take certain things down, whereas when we're talking about our Chinese counterparts, Chinese platforms that are making inroads here into the United States, the concern is a little bit, are they taking down too much? Have they gone sort of beyond content moderation and community standards into something we would really see as political censorship? I think that is a huge concern. That's something that Mark Zuckerberg was talking about. He sort of hinted that the protesters in Hong Kong were being censored. It's a little unclear to me if they're on TikTok, but it seems like they might very well be censored on there. And so Mark Zuckerberg was sort of stoking that a little bit. It's important to say here that Facebook views TikTok as a major competition for users, for viewers, particularly for those young people. And so he's not only stoking sort of a national security concern there, but he's stoking concern, I think, about a competitor. And this was part of the reason for this reshuffle that I was talking about this morning a little bit. There was a lot of concern that TikTok was working with lobbyists that were a little bit too close to Facebook.
John, we've seen more and more CFIUS review. Is that warranted?
I certainly think so. Data is becoming an integral part of society, and you have a lot of companies that are integrated across the world. Trying to balance these very difficult issues between national security imperatives and economic priorities is going to be very challenging. So I think what you'll see is, whether it's CFIUS or other sort of national security reviews that are taking place by the government, a hard look at a lot of these data companies and a hard look at a lot of information and communication technology.
John Dermody of O'Melveny and Myers and Bloomberg's Ben Brody, thank you both for joining. And coming up, Instagram picks up the tab for some celebrity videos, but it comes at a price. We'll tell you what they can and cannot say. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Facebook is bundling all of its payments tools into a single platform. The product, dubbed Facebook Pay, will group existing payment options across the network's apps into one product. The system will store users' credit and debit cards for payments. This is separate from its Calibra app, which will be storing and spending its proposed digital currency, Libra. And speaking of Facebook, the social network is trying to jumpstart its little-used Instagram TV. And to do so, it will pay for some celebrities' videos' production costs, as long as they don't film anything about politics or elections. This comes as Facebook faces continued backlash for its decision to let politicians lie in advertisements on the site. To discuss, it is Bloomberg Technology's Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook for us, and then, of course, Instagram. So my first thought was, good, because I don't care what they have to say about politics. Is that what's going on here?
Well, it is a really interesting policy for these creators to not be allowed to talk about political issues, as Facebook makes a huge deal about not censoring any political speech on its main app and allowing misinformation in ads. And I have to clarify a little bit, because it's not just that they can't talk about elections, they also can't talk about anything that Facebook considers a political issue. So they can't talk about climate change or guns or education or immigration or even health policy. All these things that are just part of the general discussion that you would expect people to want to have. If they get their production costs paid for by Instagram, they can't go there.
So why?
Instagram says that there's a big difference between letting them talk about these things and paying them to talk about these things. But remember, Facebook has a news tab where they're paying all sorts of publishers to talk about politics all the time. So there isn't a lot of consistency across the platforms, despite the fact that Facebook is trying to increase the understanding of the fact that all these things are under the same Facebook umbrella with the same policies and the same data use.
I wonder if this is smart so that Facebook doesn't appear by paying that they are also endorsing that person's views.
You could see the other side of the story there. Like if they were to pay for content that becomes political in any direction, then someone would say, well, Instagram paid to have this video made. So it is a little bit of a liability concern there.
Another story that we were talking about, Sarah, was Facebook bundling all of its payments apps now into Facebook Pay. Does this further antagonize regulators who think that this is perhaps maybe a defense mechanism so that Facebook is harder to break up?
Well, there's definitely something to be said for saying Facebook Pay across all of those services, whether it's WhatsApp or Instagram or Facebook itself or Messenger, and it's all going to be under the same umbrella. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how the company wants to make it very clear that they own all these properties, because what they found out is that the more people understand that Facebook owns WhatsApp and Instagram, they have a more favorable opinion of Facebook. Regulators, of course, are looking at that and saying, you're in the middle of an antitrust investigation by the DOJ, the FTC, by all these attorneys general. You trying to more closely integrate those products at this point looks like a political move.
Sarah, another story as well. Facebook is just the gift that keeps on giving within the news world. And Facebook has been accused in a lawsuit of censorship. They're naming Trump here as a whistleblower. Walk me through this story.
So Facebook has been trying to apply its policies so that there's no harm, there's no attacks on somebody who should be protected, and they thought that the whistleblower was that kind of case. However, their policies are not universally applied. There's a lot of subjectivity, and generally Facebook tends to act when there's public outcry about something. And while this guy got his post taken down, other people haven't, and so this lawsuit is going to bring to light a lot of the editorial decisions that Facebook makes and whether those are fairly applied across all of its users.
All things Facebook. Thank you to Bloomberg, Sarah Fryer. And coming up, fake news fires, how pro-China online groups are widening the division in a city already in turmoil. That is next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology Global Link, where we now join Bloomberg Daybreak Australia to bring you the latest in global tech news. I'm Taylor Riggs in San Francisco with Sherry Ann in New York and Heidi Stroud-Watts in Sydney. Let's take a look at the top global tech stories of the day. Sherry.
Taylor, Germany's biggest tech IPO in 19 years is on the path to redeeming itself after a rough public debut. Software firm TeamViewer is now back at its listing price after it fell 10% in its first 2 days of trading in October. This comes after its first public earnings posted 39% revenue jump from a year ago. A UAE truck delivery app startup has raised one of the largest initial rounds of capital for a startup in the region. Trucker, which bills itself as an Uber for trucks, has raised $23 million in Series A funding. The round was led by STV, a $500 million Saudi tech VC fund that previously invested in Middle Eastern ride-hailing company Careem. Careem was bought by Uber for just over $3 billion in March. Tencent is now $90 billion behind rival Alibaba in market cap. This comes after a 9-month freeze on game approvals, a Chinese economic slowdown, and the possibility it will have to suspend airing NBA games in China. Last year, it paid $1.5 billion for those exclusive streaming rights, but an NBA team's executive triggered a media blackout in China by tweeting support for Hong Kong's pro-democracy protests. And those are the top global tech stories we're watching. Heidi?
Sherry, well, as Hong Kong's anti-government protests continue into their 23rd straight week, the city is being flooded with online fake news and misinformation from both sides of the political divide. In the last 24 hours alone, authorities have denied rumours that they ordered police to fire on protesters at will, that they would use emergency powers to shut down financial markets and schools, and many more. Joining us to discuss in Hong Kong, Bloomberg Technology's Shelley Banjo has been on this story. And Shelley, you're already seeing a situation, a cycle where violence is begetting violence and unrest in Hong Kong day after day. And the fake news online is really a major contributor to that.
Yeah, fake news is obviously a problem all around the world, but it's really super visceral here in Hong Kong, where you'll see an event happen and then almost immediately you'll see posters and flyers and conspiracy theories pop up online, and then that will just fuel the anger and the angst from protesters and pro-China supporters as well, who are coming out into the streets. And so you see that direct line from fake news that happens online into the streets of Hong Kong.
Shelley, who are the culprits? Who are these tech companies that are playing a role in spreading the fake news that have not yet been held accountable?
I mean, it's happening on every platform and from both sides of the political divide here in Hong Kong. And so you're seeing this on Telegram, on the local channel here called LIHKG, which is like a Reddit back in the US. And then you're also increasingly seeing it on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. And a lot of these companies have taken steps to remove some of these fake accounts. But a lot of these accounts are actually real people who are spreading rumors and conspiracy theories. So it's not necessarily, a big disinformation campaign like we've seen out of state actors like China or Russia, but just videos and pictures that might be taken out of context and then spread around in a different context.
In terms of the legal framework, is there anything specifically there to address this dissemination of fake news?
Well, we've seen lawmakers and police come out and say, please don't believe this rumor, please don't believe this rumor. Our banks are fine. Roads will be open. But the problem is goes much deeper than tech and fake news, which is around the distrust in government and police and other authorities here in Hong Kong. And so it's not necessarily the spread of fake news, but it's kind of the lack of trust that they have in authorities that kind of lights the fake news up on fire.
And Shelley, on that same line of thinking, when does that lead to more regulation around fake news?
I mean, that's one thing that we're watching out for here, because under emergency powers, if the chief executive were to use them, they could take a greater stand on regulating the internet, shutting down certain apps. There's already been an injunction passed by the High Court, a temporary injunction here in Hong Kong that says if you do spread violence or intend to commit violence online, you could go to jail for that, or you could be arrested for that. And so those are two things that we're really watching out for.
Shelley, this comes at a time when I think it's fair to say the majority of Hong Kongers are getting all of their news from the internet.
Yeah, so we took a look at some really interesting polling numbers, which showed for the first time just this summer that the most trusted news source, and I would underscore the word trusted news source, is the internet over television, newspapers. You're also seeing an uptick of news coming from family and friends that we hadn't seen in a while here in Hong Kong.
Shelley, there's, back here in the U.S., I think about the 2016 election when we grew a lot of distrust in Facebook, and there was a lot of backlash after fake news was going on around that 2016 election. As you look to Hong Kong, when do we start to see that backlash over there?
You know, it's really interesting. We spent some time with a group of students at Hong Kong University who are looking to fight the fake news and kind of the misleading and conspiracy theories. And this one professor who's been studying it said, you know what, even if you do prove to people that this indeed is not real, that this story or that story is actually not real, to a lot of people it doesn't matter. It's the narrative that they want to believe and that they're going to share anyway. And so, you know, that makes it really difficult for these tech companies to root these things out, for governments and authorities to address the issue as well.
Well, thank you to Bloomberg's Shelley Banjo in Hong Kong. And coming up, we will have more on Tesla's Model 3. We take a look, and that success, it is hitting BMW the hardest. That is next. This is Bloomberg. Tesla plans to build its next factory near the German capital of Berlin. That's according to CEO Elon Musk at an awards ceremony on Tuesday. The electric car maker will also establish an engineering and design center in Berlin near the new airport. Germany is home to some of the world's most prestigious automakers, and this also comes at the same time Tesla is preparing to sell its cars built in Shanghai. And German automakers are among those affected by Tesla's grip on market share. Bloomberg asked 5,000 Tesla owners what it's like to live with Elon Musk's electric car. Here's some of what we found. The Model 3 is a car for millennials and Gen Xers. Most of the owners were aged 30 to 50 with above average incomes. Almost 95% were men. And the top cars drivers gave up to get a Tesla. The Toyota Prius was number one, followed closely by BMW Series 3. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Craig Trudell, who covers the company for us. So, Craig, who are the biggest losers as more consumers shift to the Model 3?
Well, the timing of this story couldn't have been more perfect for Tom Randall, this is really his project, his baby, if you will, this Model 3 owner survey. And what his survey found was as you alluded to before the break, that BMW is hit hardest by the rise of the Model 3, while the amount of trade-ins from Toyota is bigger. Toyota is a much bigger company in this market. They sell quite a few more cars than BMW does. As a share of sales, the amount of trade-ins that BMW faced was significantly more than Mercedes. I think Tom's story does go into a great amount of detail about why that might be. He harkens back to a couple of magazine reviews by the buff books, if you will, the Motor Trends of the world. And these are performance-oriented customers who care about 0 to 60 times, and that's something that Elon Musk, to his credit, has really made a big focus of how he's hyped his cars. He's talked a lot about performance and sort of made electric cars sexy, which is something that other car companies haven't been able to do.
So, Craig, talk to me about the other reasons an owner would switch. Is it because the Tesla brand is cool, or is it environmental reasons? If you're making the switch, why are you doing so?
Well, I think it was interesting. There are a lot of things in this latest version of Tom's survey that are interesting takeaways. I think the idea that a significant portion, I believe it was 55% of people who answered this survey, said that Elon Musk himself factored in their decision on whether or not to buy a Tesla and buy the Model 3. That's pretty high, and there are some great quotes in this story about the idea that one of the participants in the survey has no idea who the head of Ford is. The only reason that this person knew who is the head of Nissan is that Carlos Ghosn was in jail, has been in jail recently. So this is a company that they believe in the mission. A lot of them are Musk fans. That's no surprise. There are other interesting takeaways in here too. I think the survey found that 95% of respondents were men. If Tesla is going to have sort of sustained success, they're obviously going to need to diversify that quite a bit.
You know, Craig, on page 4, we have a vulnerability index showing that BMW is at most risk when you look at it as a percent of U.S. sales. Walk me through the rationale of why BMW really does have the most to lose on that vulnerability index.
Yeah, so I think the survey found that there were models like the Honda Accord or Mazda 3 that were kind of surprising, that you wouldn't necessarily think would be a natural jump from those cars to the Model 3. I think the level of magnitude of the risk to BMW is a surprise, but I do think that this was something that you could foresee, that BMW and Mercedes were going to be brands that would be real, sort of competitors that Tesla was going after. And you've heard some German car executives give Elon Musk some credit for really sort of doing a serious number on their car business. We've actually heard major auto dealers make similar comments that the German car companies need to do something to sort of answer this gambit that Elon Musk has thrown down here.
It was so interesting to read the story and look, in all the years that you've been covering Tesla, a company that doesn't do big Super Bowl ads. They don't do these big marketing campaigns. It really is a company that sells by word of mouth. In your years of covering Tesla and the other car makers, have you ever seen an automaker be able to do this, basically sell by word of mouth?
I think it's totally unprecedented. I do think for all the billions of dollars that automakers spend on marketing, and you look at third parties that track how much companies spend on advertising, automotive is a serious spender on marketing dollars. There is a sort of rule of thumb that nothing beats your neighbor talking up his Mustang or his Corvette. With Tesla, they have gone all in on that strategy of if we can get these cars out there, if we can leverage the star power of our CEO, we can save a serious amount of spending that these established companies shell out to promote themselves. And thus far, it's worked. I think we still are a long ways from Tesla making a serious dent in the U.S. market, but they're well on their way, and they're doing it by taking this interesting approach.
Well said. That is Bloomberg's Craig Trudell. Thank you for joining us. Now, TransferWise is one of Europe's largest financial technology startups, helping people and businesses move money across borders. Now the company is expanding into the U.S. and Asian markets. TransferWise CEO Christo Carmon discussed the company's growth strategy with Bloomberg's Rashad Salamat and David Ingalls at Singapore's 3rd annual FinTech Festival. Take a listen.
We're now moving about $5.5 billion on behalf of individuals and businesses cross-border. So that's the biggest part of what we do, is we help people and businesses, and now even banks, move money cross-border. But you're right that this is just the beginnings. And now we're also offering international banking services in about 20 countries, including all of Europe. We launched our borderless accounts with a debit card in the United States about 3 months ago. 2 months ago, we launched in Australia and New Zealand, and actually last month we rolled out our multi-currency debit cards in Singapore. So now we're starting to cover Asia with an international banking proposition as well, and it's seeing a good take up here.
Are you lending money out at the moment, or do you have any plans to lend money out?
No, we don't lend, and in terms of kind of regulatory difference, that's the main difference. So we don't actually hold banking licenses anywhere in the world, because we don't lend the deposits. We do hold plenty of our customers' deposits. Actually, a few months ago, we reported it's now more than £1 billion worth of deposits, but we don't lend them out to other people. So we're kind of a non-lending bank, if you like.
This all removed any pressure that you had to do an initial public offering. Does that remain the case? And if so, do you have an exit strategy, or do you actually just want to grow the bank, this TransferWise business, organically in the future?
This is a very good question, and we are indeed the unusual unicorn that we're profitable. We've been profitable for the for the last 3 years, and therefore we haven't needed to raise extra capital for the company. However, we have raised plenty of money. So earlier this year, we raised $292 million, which went to almost thinking of recycling part of our shareholder base, where we could provide liquidity to our early shareholders, to our early employees, and bring on new ones more appropriate for our stage of growth. So we're getting the benefits of the public markets, but we're doing that privately today. And as it stands now, we have no immediate plans to list on a public exchange.
That was TransferWise CEO Christo Carmon. And still ahead, more on the launch of Disney's new streaming service, Disney Plus. How will this platform compete with the rest? We discuss next. This is Bloomberg. Time now for the top tech calls. Slack's price target was cut to 28 from 38 at MKM Partners, which wrote that the company's growth-adjusted valuation presents an asymmetric risk-reward for the stock. The analysts affirmed the buy rating but see continued risks from Microsoft's Teams product. NVIDIA's price target was raised to $240 from $190 at Susquehanna, a move that comes ahead of the November 14 release of the chipmaker's third quarter results. The analyst wrote that NVIDIA faces the most reasonable street expectations in quite some time, with potential tailwinds from improving data centers and GPU attach rates. And Bayer named Autodesk a fresh pick and expects the November 26th release of the company's third quarter results to act as a positive event for the stock. Analyst Rob Oliver said a better-than-feared third quarter report and notable Autodesk events could provide catalysts for the stock that has been down and out this year. He has an outperform rating and a $177 price target on the stock. And those were a look at the top tech calls. Now let us get back to the top story of the day. It is all about Disney and their much anticipated debut of its new streaming service, which was hit by early technical glitches and crashes for some users. But that didn't stop the excitement and buzz on social media and worked successfully for many subscribers. Joining us now, it is True Optic CEO Andre Swanson. Andre, your take, is a glitch outage a good thing because it means demand exceeded expectations?
Well, yeah, normally it's an indicator that there's a lot more people trying to access your solution when you're having some scaling issues earlier on. In the big scheme of things, I think it's a non-event. It's a very successful day for Disney overall.
So, Andre, I asked this question to every analyst to get their take, and I want to ask you the same question. Where does Disney fit in your world of all of the streaming competitors?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think most people in the industry are looking at it incorrectly. They're looking at as if Disney Plus is a competitor for Netflix. I think Disney has already shown over the last couple of years with getting the majority ownership of Hulu, with the success of ESPN Plus, and now Disney Plus. They have a winning strategy about how to attack that market, but they're not really competing with Netflix. Disney has done a better job than anybody at getting share of wallet when it comes to media and entertainment dollars, whether it's from theme parks or merchandising or theatrical releases. And so now with Disney Plus, they have even more of a direct-to-consumer relationship and data that they can leverage to monetize across all those other revenue streams in a way that Netflix and others can't.
So this is exactly what I heard from Rich Greenfield over at Lightshed Partners at the top of this hour, where they are competing not with Netflix, but just grabbing cable subscription declines. So would you agree that perhaps they'll take on more of the cable subscription declines and that there is room for 2, 3, 4 streaming services?
Yeah, I mean, I like Rich a lot. He says some really bright things. I would argue that the decline in cable is actually irrelevant to Disney's strategy as well. I think that in terms of Disney Plus, I think that does impact Hulu and the growth of Hulu with their live service. But Disney's game is just far bigger than just even TV. You know, this is just another way for them to engage with with consumers. It's not a standalone entity in the way that other solutions are, and it's different from the strategy of the other MVPDs, or whether it's NBC with Peacock, or it's Dish with Sling TV. Disney has so many more avenues of revenue to engage with the consumer that they don't have to monetize this solution in the same way that others do in order for it to be considered a success.
So are they the clear winner, given not only they have money to spend with original programming, but also that big backlog and that library of great videos from decades ago?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to argue that Disney is not well positioned. I'm hesitant to say they're the winner because the game hasn't even really started yet. Many of the other people that will be competing for audience time and attention are still a quarter or two away from launching. But I will say that the biggest loser in all of this is absolutely Netflix, which I think is more clear, and that's because so much of the most popular content that has really driven not only subscriptions but loyalty of their platform will be leaving between Disney and AT&T and NBC Universal pulling content. And so I think that's, Netflix is not the same solution 3 to 6 or 12 months from now than what it has historically been.
Andre, about 30 seconds here. This is an expensive business. Investors will not tolerate losses for long. When do we start seeing a profit from these businesses?
If you're looking solely at the streaming part of the revenue, I think it's still going to be some time for some of these platforms until they're truly profitable. I think companies that have a legacy library that they can lean on may actually reach a profit first. But I think when we look at Disney, we can't look at streaming as a standalone because of the impact that it's going to have and the data and how they can leverage that throughout the rest of their business. So I would argue relative to that, Disney's already profiting regardless of what the street thinks.
Andre Swanston of True Optic, thank you for joining us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology and Bloomberg Technology's live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.